Hello and welcome. This is Tracy Drummond, archivist for the Southern Labor Archives, here today to talk to Bill Scheri for the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers Oral History Project. Today is August 14th, 2012. We're in Lady Lake, Florida. And welcome, Bill.
Well, thank you, Tracy.
Well, let's get started with some questions, very basic stuff. Where were you born and when?
I was born in Utica, New York on June 6, 1935.
Okay, and what were your parents doing? What kind of work did they do?
My dad worked for Bendix Aviation, and my mom worked for the cotton mills up in Utica, New York. I believe the name was Oneida Cotton Mills, located right in Utica.
And were either of them in unions at the time? Were
Excuse me?
either of them in unions at the time? Were those organized workplaces?
Bendix Aviation was represented by the steel workers,
Okay.
and I believe the knitting mill was unorganized, as I recall it.
Okay. All right. And that makes sense. It was much harder, I think, to
Yeah.
organize textile mills. So what was it like growing up, the son of your dad was a production worker?
Yes, he was, and then he worked up. I think when he retired, he was a drill press operator.
Okay. And so what was it like growing up part of a working class family in Utica?
It was a close-knit community, and I grew up on the east side of Utica, which was predominantly all Italians, which I am, and we had a close-knit family.
A big family?
No, three of us.
Okay.
Older brother and an older sister. They're both deceased now, and pretty much in tune with the parents and their wishes
Mm-hmm.
in that day and age. And we got treated quite well by both of them, and they encouraged me and my brother to go ahead and get an education.
That was important to
Yes,
them.
because neither one of them had very little education, especially my dad. He come over from Italy when he was 13 years old.
So you're second generation. No, you're first generation.
First.
Okay.
And he come over when he was 13 years old, and he was sponsored by his older brother, and he would never go back. I could never get him to go back to Italy to look at his village and all that. And he said, "No, Bill, thank you very much, but I'm happy here in the United States." And for some reason, he just wouldn't go back. He didn't want to go back and see that life again, I guess.
So
Is the best way I could describe it.
right. So they were very poor.
Yes, very poor.
And what part of Italy, may I ask?
He was from the province of Catanzaro in a little town called Andale, up in the mountains, as I understand it. And yeah, they were very poor over there.
Did
And
you?
when he came here, he didn't have much money either, other than love through his family.
Mhm. How much of the family came over? Did his parents come, or just him and his brother, or?
It was, yeah, his older brother come over. It was the
Okay.
first one. Then he sponsored my dad to come over. Then cousins come on later and so forth.
Okay. Okay. Did you ever make a trip back?
No, I never did. Me and my older brother talked about it. In fact, I was at Rome on some business, and I said, "Frank," I said, my older brother was with me. I said, "Let's go over and see the village where Dad was born and all that." And one thing led to another, and we just never made it. And I tried to get him to go back, and like I said, he was not interested in going back.
Okay. Well. Once they got here, what were some of the first jobs that your dad and your uncle had?
My uncle, throughout his whole life, he was a laborer.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a pretty big individual. He was bigger. He was 6 foot and husky, and that's all he did was outside laborer's work. And he retired as a laborer.
Okay.
And our whole family was nothing but workers. I mean, they worked their way up too and made a living for their family.
Mm.
So all of us young kids, especially me, I was the baby in my family, and they always, even during the Depression, they used to kid me, "Hey, Bill, we used to have to go haul soup for you and so forth, and make sure you had a meal during them tough time. So I thank both of them because I always looked up to both of them, and they were just good brothers and sisters.
And was your mom also Italian?
Yes.
So Utica was or you said the east side of Utica, that it was largely Italian.
Right.
Okay. And what were, so I guess it was probably very traditional. Everybody went to church on Sunday. Everybody knew each other. It was a small community. Were there a lot of labor union members in the community, or overall, how did your community feel about
Yeah, it was
labor? I mean, was it because in the South, I'm asking,
right.
because in the South it's much harder to organize, as you know, and it's not a really strong labor, as far as the United States goes, it's not as strong down here. So what was the attitude toward organized labor?
Oh, they had a good attitude towards organized labor there. And had the IM, for example, steel workers, Teamsters, and there's probably unions I'm forgetting about,
Yeah.
but it was a pretty well organized town.
Okay.
And they stuck together, and they got things by sticking together and getting better wages and benefits and working conditions by staying together. I mean, some days it was tough because they ended up on the street in the form of a strike, but they fought for the issues, and 9 out of 10 times they would win them issues because of the unity and solidarity among the people.
Mm-hmm. So you even remember, while being a small kid, you remember people talking about the union and stuff like that.
My grandfather was a union organizer for the laborers union, and I could remember him coming into my grandmother's house, and this is after he had a couple drinks. He had a tough day's work and so forth, and these were the days when it was really bad. He would try to organize people and come home with a black eye or other things wrong with his body, but he stayed right there, and he became a good labor leader in my hometown, and they always recognized him. And I'm pretty happy because my middle name I'm named after him, Lawrence.
Okay.
And he fought some heck of a battles for making sure people belong to a union and get the justice that they so deserved.
Mm-hmm.
And I might add too, my uncle. He's deceased.
And this is
now.
your mother's brother.
Right.
Okay.
My uncle, and he was an international representative for my union, the IAM.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, he worked his way up from the bottom and became what we call a Grand Lodge representative, and he passed away back in the 60s. But he was another strong labor leader.
So you really had role models, union role models,
Yeah.
growing up, and understood from the time you were a very young man
Right.
that it was important
Right.
that unions were important for
Correct.
working families.
And then on top of that, after I retired, and I had nothing to do with it, my wife accuses me of having something to do with it. Our son's a pilot for United Airlines, and he ended up as being a union rep for United. And I think just about a year ago, because he's doing so much traveling and all that, he's just relaxing now for a few years till the kids get a little older, and then he'll be back in with the labor movement. Our daughter is very active on U.S. Air.
Okay.
She's a stock clerk in Philadelphia, and my wife says she's a chip off the old block, Bill, and she fights for people's rights, and that's what it's all about,
Okay.
helping other people.
Yeah. So tell me about your education. You said your father placed a lot of emphasis on that because he
Right.
wasn't able to get one. Can you talk a little bit about growing up and going to school in Utica?
Oh yeah, I guess the way they talked it up all the time, because a lot of people couldn't afford college in that day and age, he always used to preach to me, hey Bill, get a high school education. And then I did. I got a high school education, and of course the war was on and so forth, and my older brother, he was the first one in the family to get a college education. He went through World War II and the Korean War, and when he got back on to Korea, that's when he finished his education as a mechanical engineer, and he ended up working for Grumman Aircraft Company down in Long Island. And but anyways, he pounded it in our heads to make sure we got that education. And then when I ended up a union rep, he was so proud of me. and because it's a small community, at that time I think Utica had about maybe 140, 150,000 people, and you see his son's name or picture in the paper made him so proud, and so I had to explain it, and finally when I got the call to go to Washington D.C. for the promotion, that was probably one of his toughest days, because I was the only son home at the time. My brother was still working in Long Island, and anyways, we went on. I took the promotion, and he was happy for us, and I'm missing something on your question. I didn't give you a total answer.
No, just talking about education.
Right.
And so your dad always wanted you to go to college.
Right.
And so you went just to.
Well, the only way I made it, thank God, the United States Air Force.
Oh, really?
Because
okay.
when I was in there and got out, I had the GI Bill of Rights.
Okay.
And that's when I decided I was taking college entrance exams up in Syracuse University, what I may be capable of doing, if I went for college.
Mm-hmm.
And anyways, they had me down taking accountant. You should be an accountant. You're good with figures, and they had other areas too.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt that I had 4 years already in as a mechanic, I was pretty decent as a mechanic, and that's when I decided, well, I'm going to go to aviation school.
Okay.
Now, I'm working for Mohawk Airlines at the time. I was a mechanic's helper. I even forget the pay rate. It was so low. But I decided to talk to the wife, and I said, you know what? I'm going to go to aviation school, and I elected to go to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. At the time, back in 1959, it was located up in Miami. It's now in Daytona Beach, Florida. And I did obtain my airframe and power plant license. It's issued by the FAA. And I practice as a mechanic, and I still have my license in my pocket. It's still an active license. So I guess that's how high I went on education. Then I went into the other world, which is being a union representative and representing people to make sure that they were given their rights under the contract, or I had to do something in arbitration for them, or negotiations. I've done a lot of negotiations over the years. And
well, before we get ahead so far, let's back up a little. So tell me about your time in the Air Force. You said you worked as a mechanic.
Right.
Where did you go? Were you stationed?
I took my basic training in Geneva, New York, and then from there I went to Amarillo, Texas, and I went to school for 6 months there to get the background to become a jet aircraft and engine mechanic.
So did you have the option to do that, or is that where you were sent after they evaluated you?
After they evaluated me, they said I'd be best suited to become a mechanic.
Okay.
And I did, and then from there I went to Oscoda, Michigan. I was working on fighters up there for 2 years, and from there I ended up going to Fairbanks, Alaska, and I worked on fighters up there also. And then my last year, they dissolved the squadron, and I forgot where it went. But
yeah, because that would have been between wars, right?
Yeah, this after the Korean War.
Yeah.
So then I ended up going to Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, and that was a SAC base, Strategic Air Command Base, and that's where I got discharged out of it. Before I got discharged, I'm married to my lovely bride.
Where did you meet her? Because you moved around a lot.
Yeah, she was going to college in South Dakota at the time, summer school, taking some courses, and that's where I met her. And I guess I went with her for 6 months, and we got married before I got out, and she come back east with me, and been on the East Coast ever since. Occasionally we get back to see her family. Most of them are passed on right now, but she's been a good woman for me, and always backed me no matter what I did, and even in union business, 100% behind me. Bill, if that's what you want, and it's good to have a person like that. right behind you, you know.
From the interviews I've done, union marriages have a lot of strain on them.
Right.
And they go in one of two directions, either a divorce or
Exactly.
or it's somebody who's so supportive and
Right.
and just willing to sort of not so much give up part of who they are, but just really be willing to do whatever it takes
Right.
for her husband to do well in the union and to
That's
move
right.
up their ranks and stuff. So
And it takes a lot away from the family. I mean,
yeah,
I had 2 kids. We still got 2 kids. Don't get me wrong, but it takes away where they're not seeing their parent every night. Meaning me, and
yeah,
I was on the road. But now do you understand it?
yeah,
What Dad was out there fighting for, and my son always kids me. Hey, Dad, now I know why when you first thing you got back into town, you put the suitcases down, and you went over there and you slouched down on the couch. And he's a union rep. And he said, "Boy, I know them long days that you put in, and it
right,
gets to you quite readily." But anyways,
yeah.
it's always worked out. Thank God.
Yeah. So you were discharged in '58,
Right,
and you were married by then,
right,
and you went back east,
right,
and you were hired by Mohawk.
right.
And you talked a little bit about being a mechanic's helper, and that the pay rate was really poor.
Right.
What kind of jobs did you have as a mechanic's helper?
I worked in wheels and brake department, where you build new brakes or
Mhm.
repair them, and then on wheels, landing gears, and all that, you'd be assistant a mechanic, because I wasn't a full-blown mechanic at the time, and that's what you did.
Was Mohawk organized? Was it a
Yeah,
Are
it
you-
was when I first went there in 1958. They had like an independent union. It wasn't worth a hoot
okay?
in representing people. And then I'm guessing on this one, I think it was early 60s that they got the aircraft mechanics union in there.
Okay.
And finally, maybe a year or 2 later, that's when the IAM come in,
Okay.
the International Association of Machinists.
To represent everybody and not just the mechanics.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's cleaners and stock clerks, mechanics, and been there ever since.
And were they a welcome change when the
Oh,
machinists
yes,
came in?
yes.
I mean, was there like a good vote to have the union come
Yes.
in? Okay.
Yeah, and we obtained better representation. It was more professional, and they did a good job. I mean, we were all young kids, and they come in there and fought for your rights. And we had a tough company that we were working against too. Mohawk was anti-union from the word go. And but anyways, I think they started listening to us. We made better decisions for them than they could for themselves, and improving things in that airline. And before you know it, we put a little relationship going, but not much because they were down on unions.
Right. So, so you said it was around 1960, 61 when the machinists came in.
Yeah, because when I got back out of school in '61,
Okay.
yeah, I was a machinist at that point.
And I guess since you had been in the Air Force, it wasn't too much trouble to go to Miami for school, like to be away from home.
Oh yeah, because you're already away for 4 years in the Air Force, and
Is it Concetta? Is that how
Yeah,
you pronounce
Concetta,
it?
yeah.
That's a pretty name.
yeah.
Did she go to Miami with you while you were in school, or did she stay?
That's my mother now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My wife is Audrey.
Audrey. My apologies.
Oh,
my
no
apologies.
problem.
Concetta's still a beautiful name.
Thank you.
And so is Audrey. And did Audrey go to Miami with you
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you came down? And you were here. I say here because we're in Florida. How long were you in school?
So I think I started school in October of '59, and I graduated in March of '61.
Okay. So a year and a half,
Yeah,
thereabout.
and that was the course, completion of the course. It took that long.
And what did they teach you to do exactly? How did they prepare you to go back and be a mechanic at Mohawk?
Well, at that time they were flying reciprocating aircrafts, not jets like you got now, and they would prepare you for the industry, I mean, you had to be proficient once you get out of the school to take your FAA, airframe and power plant test, and you had to pass it before they would give you their license. And you would learn in school all the different phases, whether it's sheet metal work, welding, hydraulics, and there's a whole list of subject matters that you had to complete before you got your license. And that's when you were a full-fledged mechanic. And they normally tested you on light aircraft, which most of it's not around nowadays. And but you get by that, and you could work on any aircraft, small or large, and that's what we did.
Okay. Did Mohawk help cover the cost of you going?
No.
Or did they at least hold your job while you were gone?
Yeah, they
Okay.
held my job. I was on leave of absence.
Okay.
And when I got back, I went back to work as a mechanic now. I filled a mechanic spot, and I retained my seniority in a
Okay.
mechanic's helper classification, which was a lower classification than a mechanic. Of course, I got a good pay raise too, as the mechanics rates were up there much higher than a mechanic's helper.
Okay. So the union had come in while you were gone.
Right.
Okay. Okay. And when did you make mechanic, or did you?
That's when I got promoted. My seniority is March of 1961. I forget the exact date. It seems like either the 21st or 23rd of March.
Okay.
That's when I started accruing my mechanic's seniority.
Okay. And I assume you joined the union right away.
Oh yeah,
when
you
you
had to.
got back. Okay.
Yeah,
It was a
you
closed
had-
shop.
Yeah,
Okay.
you had to.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Pay your initiation, then pay your dues.
Okay. Did you have a like a period before, sometimes there's like a waiting period before you can join. You have to be there 6 months or so. Or?
Yeah. I think it was 90 days, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. See,
And
that's
that-
not bad.
And
Couple
that was your
months.
probation. No,
Yeah.
but see, I was handled differently than a new hire coming in, because I already had my tenure
Okay.
with the company. Then I went to school, then I come back. But normally, if you get hired, as I recall a contract, then you were on probation for 90 days. At the end of 90 days, then you had to join the union, okay? And or the company can let you go for whatever reason. They won't let you go, and that's it. No seniority, you're out of a job. But once you get by the 90 days, then you join the union, and it starts getting stable. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. And how long did it take you? And that was Local Lodge 75,
Right.
IEM, Local Lodge 75. How long did it take you to become active in the union? To become, I assume you started shop steward?
Yeah.
Okay. In the engine shop. So
Right.
what were some of the common complaints you'd get, or grievances
Well,
you'd get?
our complaint was our shop steward at the time was not very good. He was always trying to please the company and not go out and represent members, right? So when I come back from school, I'm working in the engine shop, and I didn't go out and solicit it. They solicited me and said, "Hey, Bill, come on, you've been around the airlines before you went out to school. Why don't you run for shop steward?" I said, "No, I got no interest. I just got out. I got my license and all that. I want to practice aviation." So anyways, they kept the pressure on me in the shop, my fellow guys that I was working with, and they did talk me into it. And I ran for shop steward, ended up beating them, and they were happy as heck. And now the company's in a quandary because they didn't know me too well, and I tried to represent people right and be fair. And I mean, not just for the employees, I'm talking company too. I was always trying to be fair for the company and the man, that he was right, or lady, under that contract. If they weren't, I was probably tougher on the company, on them, than the company would be. If somebody comes in and gives you a big snow job, just that, and you go check a grievance out, and it's not factual, and then you have to tell them, "Hey, no, you don't have a case." And I did that. I was very for it, and I'm not boasting. I'm just trying to give you a little history. I was involved in a lot of elections, from local to district representatives to international, once I go with the international, you got to get elected across the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
For 4 years, I never lost an election. Thank God for that. And my partner John, he detonated Peter Paul. We're just fortunate because I guess we're out there trying to help people and be honest with them, and we weren't worrying about brown nose in the company. We
Right.
were trying to make sure they got their rights. And
Well,
of course, they used to get mad at John and I so much, but anyway, that's another day.
Well, did Mohawk have round-the-clock shifts?
Yes.
Okay, and how many? And so there were shop stewards assigned to each shift.
Right.
How many shop stewards did you have per workers? Was it like a 1 to 50 ratio or a 1 to 200 ratio, or do you remember?
That day and age. Wow. It's a good question.
It's fine if you don't remember. It's just sometimes I'm curious about how, the differences between different shops.
Under our contract later, as we develop better contracts and all that, I think it was something like every 25.
Okay.
In
Every
the department,
25 workers?
there had to be a shop steward.
Okay.
Yeah. Then we had committee people too, above and beyond them, as I recall. Then I seen shops as small as 2 or 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the guys said, take over the shop steward. The company had no problem. And so it varies.
Okay.
What I'm trying to say, it varies. And then you get out in a big crew, 3 shifts. I'm going to say maybe 100, 150 people. You probably get, I'm talking with days off and all that coverage, you probably get probably about 10, 12 in a big shop stewards across all shifts. And then we had, you call a chief steward too.
Mm-hmm.
They report back to him.
Okay.
Okay. So it varies depending on the contract.
Okay.
Some employers didn't mind it. Other employers would fight you tooth and nail because they want to keep the representation as low as could be, so you could be working on your job rather than going over there and talking union business, and they got to pay you. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways.
Well, so you were shop steward for a year or so, and then you were on the grievance committee.
Right.
You were the grievance committee chairman.
Right.
Was that a position that came along with being shop steward, or was that an elected position?
It was elected.
Okay.
Yeah.
And well, tell me about being on the grievance committee.
Well, it's you get a grievance within your department and all that, and now you got all the departments under you and so forth. And what you do there is try to settle grievances. You hold meetings with the company. Sometimes they get backlogged, and then you have to go down and sit with the company and say, listen, you got some bad grievances, we got some good ones here, and let's get this thing going, And once in a while you catch a good supervisor hearing them, and they would move the grievance procedure and get them settled rather than let them backlog. But with that airline, they always like the backlog stuff. Get the people disgusted, the union ain't doing nothing for you, stuff like that. But we had a strong group, and they stuck together, and we fought for what we thought was right. And the people, that's the way it was. Hey, so my leader's saying this, we got a good case, I don't want to hear your baloney that I should be withdrawing my case, because that's management be trying to talk to them. But,
Well, did you ever have any grievances that led to either arbitration or really big things, or that led to maybe changes in the next contract or any?
oh yeah, we had grievances that go to full route where you go in arbitration, and you got to bring in a neutral party to settle it. And then in the airlines we have what we call a system board of adjustment. It's 4 members, and if I recall it right, 2 from the union, 2 from the company, and whoever your rep is, me or anybody else in the shop that had experience, you go present your case and so forth. Mr. Peter Paul and myself, we were both general chairman, full-time reps. We presented a lot of them cases. to a neutral, and each party pays half the cost of his salary for the day, and then he'll render a decision. Normally under law it's supposed to be 30 days, but they stretch it, and they may take 60 days, 90. I've seen them go as long as 6 months before you get a decision. But the system's working right. It's a very good system. But when a company makes up their mind that, hey, let them pile up, the union can't afford to process all these cases, and they're going to withdraw them anyways. And we stuck together. Oh, then I'm sorry. Then 1 year was so bad, we had so many grievances piled up. Mr. Peter Paul and the company got together when he was the general chairman, and they went for expedited arbitration, on-the-spot decisions on the grievance with a neutral party.
I've never heard of this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And they were non-precedent setting, and then finally we cleaned up our grievance files. We got rid of all the backlogs, and I mean, they were making payments all over the place, whether it's overtime or something else, and that helped us out immensely. And then the company knew we were serious. We can't get away with this. We got to start dealing with these people up and up and trying to settle these cases. And it did improve somewhat.
Okay. Well, is it are there any sort of actions you can take against the company if they sit on grievances too long, or is there, or do they always find a loophole to kind of?
Yeah, no, there's no time limit. There's a time limit. You want to take a grievance and you're going to the system board of adjustment, you got 30 days for that appeal.
Okay.
But other than that, no.
Nothing that could really hold them to a timeline or
No.
anything like that. Okay. So it looks like in 1962 you ran for vice president. And you ran for vice president of your local
Yes.
in 1962.
Right.
And president in 64. Before we talk about that, let me ask you: did you guys ever strike at Mohawk?
Oh, yes.
Tell me about some of the strikes y'all had and the reasons behind
We had
this.
one strike, as I recall it. It was 1967.
Okay.
Mr.
So while you were president.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Peter Paul was our assistant general chairman, full-time rep, in the middle of the winter in upstate New York, cold, and we decided to strike him. And it was over our pension plan. Not everybody was in the pension plan because with Mohawk and the collective bargaining agreement at that time, if you were a participant, you had to pay to be into the pension plan. And of course, very few people wanted to pay. We're all young. Who's thinking about a pension? Make a long story short, we're out on strike 58 days in the cold weather. Now this is the whole system. I'm just talking about Utica, but it applied to the whole system.
Right.
I think we had 15 cities at the time.
Wow.
And we ended up get a settlement, and we got a non-contributory pension plan. It was fully paid for by the company, and because the people stuck together, and they tried to get us to break our picket lines by getting people to come in, and we all stood real solid, and we won our point. And that was the first pension plan that any airline got in our industry.
Really?
Total IM and other unions too was the first one. So we were pretty proud of that. We were a small group at the time. But anyway, yeah, that was 1967.
Well, in the few years that the local had been in operation, about 7 years at that point, did y'all have an ample strike fund to cover 2 months? And what kind of support did y'all get from other unions in the area?
We got a lot of support, not just in the area, across the whole union.
Okay.
And other unions also.
Okay.
And yes, we got good contributions, which subsidized the strike, and we had a strike fund, and it's still in existence with the International. And I'm trying to think, I think it was $25 a week we got. And then a lot of people don't believe this. We were eating surplus foods because we went down to the armory, and of course, I was president. She said, "Bill, I'm not going to do that." I said, "Don't be proud. You're entitled to it." So she went down there because we had one small child at the time. And they see Audrey go, and then the rest of the wives would go down.
Right, because I think that would be a good example for the rest of the wives.
And
Yeah.
pick up the food for the family, and you get spam and stuff like that. Just enough to keep you in existence, you know.
Right. Spam has its moments.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So tell me about your run for vice president. Did you have any competition?
For the international?
No,
or
no,
local?
for the local.
No, I didn't.
No, it was just you.
No, wait a minute. I'll take that back.
Because sometimes, did you run on a ticket with?
No, it wasn't on a ticket.
Okay.
That we got smarter later on, and then we ran tickets.
Okay.
That was I did have an individual run against me. Yeah, and I beat him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you'd done good work with the grievance committee.
Yeah, grievance committee, shop steward. You know that all helps you become a better union rep.
So, what are your duties as vice president?
In the local?
In the local.
Yeah, it's to assist the president or any assignment he may give you, you know. Whether it's go help the grievance committee chairman or something like that.
Yeah,
you know.
okay.
Or go talk to the membership here or there. Or in his, well, a lot of times he couldn't make it. He'd be out of town or something. And you got union meetings coming up. You end up running a union meeting, okay, in his absence. And there's stuff like that.
Okay. Did y'all have a separate treasurer or business manager position, or was that sort of absorbed by the president or vice president?
I'm sorry.
Like at your local union?
Right.
What were the officers? Did y'all have a treasurer or a?
Yeah.
Okay.
We had
Separate.
president, vice president, treasurer, recording secretary. I think that's it.
Okay.
Them were the four basic ones.
Okay. And then you became president in 1964.
Right.
And was it a 4-year term, or did you get two 2-year terms?
No, every year. You had to run every year.
You had to run every year. That's
every
a lot
year.
of work.
Yeah, every year.
Okay. Well, tell me about that.
Yeah, I was vice president at the time, and one of our elderly guys who was president at the time, he said, "Hey, Bill, I'm retiring. You should put your name here and run for it." And that's what I did, and I won it. And I had a couple people run against me on that one, but they lost. And I did that for almost 4 years till I went with the international
Okay.
as assistant airline coordinator.
Okay. And your work at your local was, because some of the people I've talked to, when you are the president of a local, you're also part of a district, or you're also automatically an officer in a district. But you
No.
weren't. You were just over the
No,
local.
yeah, the district was separate. Yeah.
And heading into the late 60s.
Well, I'm sorry. There is one connection.
Sure.
When I was assistant general chairman, there is a tie-in with the district. At that point, that's when I was on the district executive board.
Okay.
And
And was there overlap in your presidency and being on the district board?
No, there was no connection there.
Okay, so you went from one to the other.
Right, because when you're a full-time rep, then there is a connection with the district.
Okay. And as president, though, were you still on the shop floor every day and doing president stuff?
Yeah.
Your work, okay, outside of that. And were there any big issues, the mid to late 60s, there were a lot of civil rights issues in the United States. Did y'all ever have a problem with integration in the plant, or with it, or any other sort of issues that might mirror what was going on nationally?
Well, it affected us, don't get me wrong, but as far as the airline itself, discriminatory and all that, whether you're black, whatever the color of your skin was, no, we didn't have too much of that. We did have the seniority problem, though, that hit our industry way back, and you had to get me on this one. I'm going to say probably early 80s, or the EOC come out, and I'm trying to think how that worked now. there was court cases too in the airline division whereby blacks were awarded seniority because of the color of their skin, and they jumped over a lot of people after these rulings come down where they jumped ahead of some of the guys that had been there for years, but that was a government type of situation. And then of course you had to slide them in with their seniority, and we got a little bitch in there, but not too much. Got in the major airlines, the big ones, they had a lot of trouble with that.
Okay.
A lot of problem with that. Because they thought it was unfair that people, because of the color of your skin, you jump ahead of a white person who's been there for years doing his job. But as far as with Mohawk, no, we didn't get too much of it.
Okay. And so you became Assistant General Chairman of District Lodge 147 in
Right.
1968. And District Lodge 147 eventually merged into District Lodge 141.
That's correct.
And what were your duties then once you became Assistant General Chairman?
District 147, I would represent at a district level all the Mohawk people. At that time, I think there was 15 stations. And then you would handle
When
their...
you say 15 stations, do you mean 15 different plants?
Yeah,
Or
15 different locations.
Okay.
Across...
The United States?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
they were everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mainly on the East Coast, though.
Okay.
Mohawk was like an East Coast airline.
Okay.
You didn't have the first part of that question. I just lost it.
Oh no, just how did your duties change when you became Assistant General Chairman?
Oh, then you got to end up... You got locals now reporting to you. Local lodges across the system. And then you represent people, like I said earlier, in grievances, up to including arbitration. Most of the local stuff is handled by the local lodges. But when it gets up to system board or arbitration, that's the responsibility of Assistant General Chairman. And you'd be out there servicing your membership too.
Okay.
You know, they want to see you, they want to talk to you on different issues, and it's not just one location. You know, away you go, get on an airplane, and
So this is the first time you traveled a lot,
yeah.
and I
Yeah.
bet that was hard because
Yeah.
you probably had 2 kids by then.
What was it? 60.
64? No, 68. No,
Yeah.
yeah, because it looks like Sandra was born in 68.
Yeah, she was. You're good. It's
Well, you wrote
yeah,
it
I
down.
know.
I'm referring to your name.
that's April. Yeah, April '68. Yeah, and that's and then you, of course, you had 10 more meetings with other unions and so forth. So you try to keep coordination going. You know, you're involved with the FLCIO, and it goes on and on wherever they need. You know, get a hold of Bill. He's a full-time rep up here, and we need his help there and there. And you always tried to help because it's one union, you know, in this whole world, and you try to stick together. A lot of people don't practice that anymore, but that's what made us so great and why we won so many things in the machinists union, because people did stick together.
Were there any, when you were Assistant General Chairman, were you also helping with areas where they were trying to maybe organize?
Oh, yes.
Or were all the Mohawk shops organized at that point, or were you still trying
Yeah,
to?
Mohawk was organized,
Okay.
but then you got involved in other non-union places that you were trying to help organize, or the international would get a hold of you. Hey, Bill, need to send you out west over here. I remember one, for example, with Hughes Air West. They were, the mechanics were in an independent union, so I spent 6 months of my life out there trying to turn them around to come back in our union, and they just didn't want to do it.
It's hard. I think organizing might be the hardest.
Oh, it is.
The hardest
Yeah.
work with the lowest payoff.
Exactly. But you got to get in with the people and find out what they're doing, what their thinking is, and I kind of liked it myself, but I had a lot more duties than just that. But I learned quite a bit from it, and I've trained other people that were under me, and they're good organizers right now for the IM. They do a heck of a job for us. And but anyways, I'm trying to think what else.
Well, when you were Assistant General Chairman, you must have been doing a really good job because in 19, well, there's a little gap in time here. It looks like that only goes through 72, and that you become assistant airline coordinator in 77. What happened between 72 and 77?
72? Did I put a wrong date down?
Maybe. Here we can see it jumps from 72 to 77.
68.
Oh, okay, I see. Because it was 72 to 77 at 141. It was 68 to 72 at 147.
That's
so,
it.
Yeah,
Right.
and
That's
so 72 to 77 was 141.
Right.
Well, once it merged, did your responsibilities change in any
Oh
way?
yeah, I picked up a larger group.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Because if they merged, that was more
Yeah,
people and more.
exactly.
And was it more than just Mohawk at that point?
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
okay, and still mostly East Coast.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had United Airlines. I had Flying Tigers. I had a couple fixed base operators up in Providence, refueling companies, and places out in St. Louis. But my majority was the East Coast,
Okay.
and working down through Pennsylvania, Ohio, all that.
So when 147 covered, or I'm sorry, 141 covered New York over to Ohio.
Oh, 141 went right out to the coast, California.
Oh, so just straight
Yeah.
across.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they were down south too, but I ended up mainly on the East Coast because that's where all my time was. And my boss at the time said, "Hey, give that to Bill. That's his former people."
And who was your boss at the time?
That time in 141, George Robinson.
George Robinson.
He's not dead. Yeah.
Okay. Did y'all ever try to organize the air traffic controllers?
No,
No,
because you can't.
because they're
Executive order.
executive order, right?
Yeah.
Because they're government employees.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
All right. Okay. Just out of curiosity, because I know Patco was forming around
Yeah.
like in the late 60s,
Right.
and just given the scope of the different types of jobs you represent. But I should know that, and I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I should know that.
No problem.
But you must have caught somebody's eye at headquarters because in 77 you were asked to come on board as assistant airline coordinator.
Right.
Well, while you were still working as assistant general chairman, how did your work with headquarters increase during that time? Because I imagine that was the first time you really worked actively, or not actively with headquarters, but you had more contact with them on a
Yes, that's
regular
correct.
basis.
That's correct. But me and Mr. Peter Paul started. I started December of 58. He started in February of 59 when you talked to him from Mohawk. So we both come up through the movement
Okay.
together. And then when I was working...
Were you both in Utica, or were you in
He was
Mohawk in
Rome.
different
He
places?
was in Rome.
Okay.
15 minutes away.
Okay.
And then, let's see. How the heck did that go? Oh yeah, he was sitting there full-time rep, and he was in headquarters. He was an airline coordinator, and that's when he asked me to come in. And I said, "John, I just moved to Pittsburgh, built a brand new home. My wife and kids loved it as a working town, and they liked it." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, you got to follow the leader because we're going to Washington, D.C. And that's like they still kid me about it. And ended up taking the assistant airline coordinator's job. And that was due to John promote me. He knew my the way I worked and all that, and representing people. And well, let me put it this way: every position he vacated as we come up through, I filled. Okay. Yeah, that would be a better way to put it.
Okay. So you were 3 years assistant airline coordinator.
Yes.
How did your work change when you moved from assistant general chairman to assistant airline coordinator?
Well, now you got the whole country.
Right. Okay.
Okay, ground workers in our union, and it's a bigger focus now, and you got to help your districts, your locals, and of course on top of that, I was assistant, and I had to please my boss, the airline coordinator. Then above here is the vice president and so forth. And but it always worked out. We always had team effort going. Okay. And no one man knows everything, especially in airline business or any group. You know,
Yeah.
you've got large numbers of people. You got to depend on each other, and that's what we did. But John was one of my big sponsors.
Okay. Well, you said that you had to move your family, that you had just built a new house in Pittsburgh when you got the call to go.
Right.
So everybody packed up and went to Washington, because the offices were still in Washington.
Yeah.
Then, yeah. So
And we lived there 14 months.
14 months.
Brand new home, yeah. And then it took me 6 months to sell it, and then I was already working in Washington at the time.
Okay.
But they ultimately sold it, and then they moved into Silver Spring, Maryland.
Right.
And I worked downtown Washington.
So, was it hard to take them out of school? Was it, or did you? I guess maybe your wife dealt with that more than.
Yeah, we waited and got the right time in the
Yeah.
then the house was sold, and then enrolled them in schools in Maryland.
Yeah. Okay. In 1980, you were no longer assistant airline coordinator, but airline coordinator.
Correct.
And I'm sure you were doing a lot of the same duties then that you had been as assistant airline coordinator.
Right.
But there had to be a change, or there had to be, So can you talk a little bit about, sort of stepping up a little higher in the position?
Yeah, once again, you're going to the next plateau, and your group gets bigger, and now you're in charge, and you got full-time representatives that report to you.
And were you handling folks in Canada too at this point?
I'm sorry?
Were you handling the folks in Canada too at this point, or were you just U.S.?
Just U.S.
Okay.
Just U.S. We just represented U.S. ground workers.
Okay.
And it's a big job. I mean, to keep on top of everything, and you try to do your best, but had good cooperation from our districts and our local lodges. Anyways, I was fortunate. I mean, I was out there, they knew me for years and all that, and we never pulled any punches. I had something to say, they would know it, they would hear it loud and clear, and vice versa. Hey Bill, this ain't right, all right, let me look into it, we'll check it out. And if they were right and somebody was wrong, I'd say, hey, you were right, we're gonna correct it,
Well, while you were airline coordinator, you had the big Eastern strike.
Yeah.
Can you talk about Eastern?
Yeah.
I think Eastern is a fascinating event. I think the strike we have a lot of Eastern related materials at the archives.
Okay.
And so it's always one of my favorite sort of areas to point researchers toward if they're looking for stuff. How involved were you in that?
Well, I was really involved because we had Mr. Bryan, who was
Charlie Bryan.
Charlie Bryan was president and general chairman of District Lodge 100 at the time, and him and his negotiating committee were trying to get a contract for our people there, and it got to a stalemate, and that's when Frank Lorenzo took over the airline, and he was anti-union as could be.
But had you had former dealings with him?
Yes, I did.
When he was with Texas Air?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very little, but I did have contact with him.
Okay.
But anyways, they were trying to get a fair contract for our people and all that. I think it was back in '89, if my memory serves me right. And they just couldn't reach a deal with this guy. Everything is he wanted givebacks. He wanted us to destroy our contract, okay, and get us down to little or nothing, and then he would sign on. And we said, no, we're not going to do that. So Peter Paul at the time was vice president. He said, hey, Bill, I know you ain't going to like this assignment, but you got to go in there and handle it. So I went down to handle the Eastern situation with Charlie Bryan and the whole crew.
You were down in Miami?
In Miami,
Okay.
yeah.
How long did the strike last?
Oh, boy. I should have looked at that at home. A long one. I forget the days now, to be honest with you. It was a long strike.
Did they bring in people to because I know that even the airline pilots did a
Yeah.
sympathy strike
Oh, yeah.
with you guys.
Right.
But were they able to bring in people to perform some of the? Was Eastern able to bring in scabs to do some of the
Yeah.
work to kind of keep it going?
Yeah, they
Okay,
did.
okay.
And then they used supervisors and everything else
Mhm.
in trying to break our strike and break our union, but that never happened. The number of days, it's he couldn't break us, even Lorenzo with all those big guns. And the more he get involved, the more he would tick our people off, and they got stronger by the days. So anyways,
And I know a lot of it took place in Miami, but were there any other big hubs for Eastern?
Oh,
Was
yeah.
Atlanta? I know Atlanta was
yeah,
a big
Atlanta
hub.
was, New York,
Okay.
just to name a few. And I tried my best to get a deal from him, and I never forget it. Going into midnight on the strike date, he slides a packet of paper like this under my door in the hotel. I look at it, it was
Oh,
nothing but
Lorenzo got
yeah.
somebody to slide something?
Yeah.
Okay.
to
Ooh.
destroy it.
Mhm.
He destroyed our contract.
Mhm.
And he said, here's the agreement, more or less take it or leave it. Or he didn't say take it or leave it, but along them lines.
Mhm.
And there's no way you could sign on. And that's when we struck him. And he never did improve any of his conditions. He just wanted it that way for some reason. And I had a lot of good friends on Eastern Airlines that I worked with for years. And when I was a mechanic and all up through Jersey and elsewhere, but I don't know, he just didn't want to put it together. He just made up his mind that he was going to break the machinist union,
Mhm.
and he ultimately
Well, didn't he do
killed
that?
his own airline.
Yeah, well, didn't he do that in Texas too, though? I mean,
Huh?
he shut unions down on
Oh,
his
yeah.
airlines in Texas.
Yeah.
So, moving in. Well, how were your dealings with Frank Borman leading up to Lorenzo?
I had a good relationship with Frank Borman,
Mhm.
and so did John Peterpool. And I mean, he was tough. You get there and negotiate. Darn it, you guys, you know better than that. I can't do that, you know. And he would always play that way.
Mhm.
But make a long story short, you could always cut a deal with him for a
Mhm.
fair contract.
Right.
You could. And he was a decent man, a
Okay.
very decent man.
And Bill Essery, I believe, was called in at some point.
Yeah.
And Bill Essery, who was a machinist,
Oh yeah,
was called in to mediate.
yeah.
How did that go?
He tried, but he was unsuccessful.
And he's
too.
pretty successful at, I
Yeah,
think
he
that's what
is.
he's known for.
That's
He's
right.
really great.
Yeah, yeah.
So he was just.
But that was
unable.
when Borman was in.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, he was successful in helping our union,
Yeah.
getting a contract.
Right,
I
right.
thought you meant when Lorenzo was around.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess I was referring
Okay.
to that too. So it was just at that point, Lorenzo, you feel, was just unwilling
no,
to.
he couldn't.
He would rather see the airline destroyed than
Yeah.
to concede to.
Yeah. We lost a lot of good people in that airline.
Mm-hmm. And what was the aftermath of that like? Did that take the wind out of the IAM sails, so to speak? Did that?
No, I think it made us stronger across the I'm talking when the companies look down and say,
Mhm.
well, we got to watch what we're doing with these guys,
Mhm.
you know, because here there, Lorenzo and company was going over there to break us, and he ended up breaking himself, the
Mhm.
airlines, and
Mhm.
people went out and found other jobs, probably not equivalent to a mechanic's job on Eastern, and
Mhm.
like I said, we had a lot of friends there, and I just hated to see the airline go, but we tried everything we could to save it.
So you had mechanics, but you also had what you would call ground workers there too. Like, didn't you also represent the baggage handler?
Oh,
And
yeah.
So
Yeah,
so
ramp.
not just mechanics,
No,
but
we had ramp there, we had mechanics, we had I'm trying to think of some of the other classifications. Anyways, there were several different classifications we represented, not just mechanics, but the majority was mechanics.
How many employees lost their jobs when Eastern? How many machinists?
8,900. That
80
number I remember, 8,900.
8,900. Okay. Did you feel going into that strike, looking back on the Patco strike from '81, did you feel like that informed the way corporations handled strikes from that? Even though Patco was a government strike,
Yeah.
government employees. Did you feel that Reagan shutting them down so quickly and so, some would say viciously,
Right.
do you think that informed the way corporations then handled strikes starting from that
Oh, yeah.
point on?
I think
Did y'all have any other strikes in the 80s leading up to Easter?
No,
Or anything that significant?
No, that was probably the biggest one in the 80s. But I think, yeah, the corporations got stronger because of that, because of what Reagan did and so forth. The funny part about that, and very few people know it, Patco, they had a letter, and it's still in existence somewhere in somebody's records, where they promised Patco that they were going to get a pay raise. This is Reagan under his signature and so forth.
I have copies of that letter in the
Okay.
archives. Yeah.
And you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, exactly.
And he never kept the promise. Because if he kept his promise and he gave pay raises, there would have been no shutdown.
Right.
And people getting fired to the tune of 14,000. Because that's how many people.
It was
got
11.
fired.
It was like 11,000. It was 11,000.
Okay.
But I mean, yeah. But it was a lot. That's
Right.
That's so many people.
But very few people in the public know that he promised to give him a pay raise, and he ends up firing him.
He wooed them.
He was not a favorite of the labor movement. A lot of people like him, good talker, smiling and all that, and then go take his naps and let somebody else do the dirty work. Anyways.
But by the time though, the Eastern was having trouble, and the machinists were striking with them. That was at the very end of his term,
Yes,
his
it
two
was.
terms. And I guess
Yeah.
the Bush HW was
Yeah.
George H.W. Bush was.
We
was
were
coming
trying to
in.
get a presidential emergency board set up for Eastern, okay, to the government, and HW.
And what would the presidential emergency board have done?
Oh,
How would they have helped you?
Oh, they move in and they set up an arbitrator,
Okay.
and he hears both sides.
Okay.
And he makes a decision which is binding. First Bush would not agree to that. He
Okay.
said no, and that's the end of Eastern Airlines.
Okay.
Now most presidents go out there and agree on a presidential emergency board. Very few people know this. The first Bush was HW.
H.W. George H.W.
Okay, HW was a great friend of Frank Lorenzo. They lived about 2 doors apart down there in Houston. I seen both of their homes going by them, of course. And there's a tie-in. I think there was a tie-in. In no way was he going to agree on a presidential emergency board. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that Bush made, because there probably would have been a settlement.
Right.
With a third party coming in and reviewing it, maybe comes up with better ideas than what we had going and settle it. And you talk to Eastern people now and they'll tell you that's the one thing we cannot understand, why the first Bush would not agree to a presidential.
When you say
election.
Eastern people, do you mean machinists who worked for Eastern, or do you mean the Eastern, like, administration?
Well, I think everybody would like to see a presidential emergency board there, okay?
Yeah.
And they didn't. He said no.
Because I've talked to some of the folks who worked in PR for
Right.
Eastern, and they were equally devastated.
Yeah.
That I mean, they're not necessarily pro-union,
Right.
but they're equally devastated at how things
It's
ended.
another step in the procedure that could resolve something. And he wouldn't let that happen,
Okay.
which I don't understand, but that's Bush.
Well, what's your reaction to people who say that it was the union's fault, that Eastern, that y'all wanted too much?
No, not really.
You don't have
No.
you don't hear that?
No.
Okay.
No, because all our contracts, even our Eastern over the years, they were they coincided with the rest of the industry. We weren't trying to get pie in the sky type of situation. He just didn't want us to go that way for improvements. He's trying to take us the other way. You're going to go back to wages that were came about many years before, real low. That's where he wanted to take us. He wanted to take away benefits. I mean, the list goes on and on. I don't even know if I got that paper yet. I probably shredded it because it was terrible.
Well, do you think that deregulation had anything to do with the way airlines were operated?
Oh, sure.
Going in, and if that had maybe a direct effect, or maybe not even a direct effect, but if that had some sort of effect on the way corporations dealt with the unions that were organized for airlines. How did deregulation affect the machinists?
Oh, well, we were against it from the onset.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
we said it's not going to work because you're going to see very few airlines in existence. I mean, this is all stuff we put in writing
Mm-hmm.
to Congress and Senate and so forth.
Was
It's-
that part of Wimpesinger's testimony?
Who?
Wimpesinger's?
No, it's my testimony.
Your testimony?
Peter Paul's too.
Okay, so y'all testified.
Oh yeah, you're going to end
Okay.
up with about 4 carriers in this country, and for the simple fact you're going to have cutthroat competition, and sure as heck it all come about. I mean, look at the major carriers. You're down to very few. Okay, and what blossomed out of it? You got a lot of commuter type aircraft running around this country. Of course, we said maybe prices will go down momentarily, talking fares, but in the long run, it's going to be like a monopoly.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have full control, and that's what happened. And on top of that, one of the worst things that happened is that before deregulation, we had the Civil Aeronautics Board, and you had to go present your case. Whether you're going for a route addition or deletion, they had to give you approval. Now that no longer exists. It's just a mess. I think they made a major mistake.
And that was the Carter administration.
Yeah, I know, that's right. And the deregulation was not the key. And Alcon is just the greatest thing for the industry, and it's not. What you got now is a bunch of passengers going on airplanes, and we said it's going to be like loading cattle onto a cattle car. I mean, you can see the service, how it's been degraded.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even get. I don't know if you get crackers anymore or what.
If you're lucky, you
Yeah.
get a little bag of peanuts.
Yeah. But anyways, it's all degraded. Where before, I mean, it was a glorious industry. Everybody liked to work in it and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Now you go out in the field, you hear so many people pissing and moaning, how bad it is. They could care less. And the one main reason is that you no longer have airline people running these airlines. They're chief financial officers. What's the bottom line? How much money could we make? Forget the employees. We'll take care of them too by decreasing their wages and benefits. And that's what happened. They destroyed a good system. All the airline people are out of it. People that knew how to run airlines, they're no longer in it. They got all financial people. And when they get fired from one spot, boom, they go over here and get hired in another airline. Brings along the same scenario. And that's, you got to have airline people running,
Right.
hands-on, know what they're doing, and then you'll see profitable airlines
Right.
again.
Well, the person who I think was in charge of Eastern before Borman, and I can never remember him.
Rickenbacker?
Yeah, that he was a good airline.
Mhm.
Or he understood airlines.
Yes, he was.
And
Yes, he
that
was.
he understood what was important
Yeah.
for airlines to run.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
I hear that from
Yeah.
both sides,
Yep.
from the union and the non-union
Right.
folks. Well, speaking of Carter, being for deregulation, how did it? And because I talked to Justin Ostro a little bit about
Right.
this today, how disappointed labor was with Jimmy Carter.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about, were you involved at the political level with the machinists, or?
Oh yeah, and help him get them elected and all
Mhm,
that. Yeah,
mhm.
but I was never close to him. No.
Okay.
I know very little bit about his presidency, other than
Okay.
I had high hopes too.
Right.
Where you had a scholar going in there out of the academy and always smiling, and I figured, hey, maybe there's something new here we got to turn things around here.
Mhm.
Of course, the opposite was true.
Mhm.
You know, interest rates skyrocketed, to tell you, it went crazy. And my best friends, who are some of my best friends that are Republicans, they always zing me on that.
Yeah.
What's about Jimmy Carter? Let's talk about him, Bill, you know?
Mhm.
And then I'll throw in another good president. Okay, let's talk about this one. And you're off to the races. You know? Nobody really likes Carter that I know of. I'm talking in the labor movement.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think he helped.
So much so that Patco was talked into supporting Reagan, and then
Right.
he was no help to them. Well, were there any other big issues, sort of political or legislative, during your time as airline coordinator, or even president? We could go ahead and start talking about being vice president of the transportation, which was the ground workers for airlines and
Right.
railroads. And once you became vice president, that would have been in '94. You were there, and you retired in '99.
Yeah.
Okay, so for 5 years, you were in that position. How did that change, going from airline coordinator to vice president of the?
Once again, you picked up more responsibilities,
Mm-hmm.
but what I was always proud of, I had a good bunch of guys, staff, and field representatives, and I always liked to organize when I even first started, because I says, you got to organize to keep the movement going, because people are retiring, you need to replace them and all that. And in just my 5 years that I was there, we organized, I'm talking strictly our division, 45,000 new members, and you don't see that too often.
Mm-hmm.
And the last big group we got was United Airlines, the passenger
Okay.
service agents, and that was a big group. It was about, I want to say 16,000 we organized, but the guys went out there and they worked it, and I had a good crew, and I'd be out there too, because they would say, hey, Bill's out here. Yep. For the simple reason, not that I'm checking on you guys, I just want to tell you how important this thing is, that we win it. And we did that on United, we did it on US Air. I'm talking big campaigns now.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing it again. They just organized a few months back, Continental Airlines. And they're organizing, starting to get better in our division. Maybe the pendulum's changing a little bit, where people are seeing, hey, we got to have union representation to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And because I say, if you don't have it, you're in kind of trouble. At least with a union and so forth, you can go out there and try to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
You have somebody speaking for you, and they're usually professional people. And I don't know, I always thought it was better to belong to a union and rather than not belong in one.
Right.
And it'll show you, you're a scholar. it shows you just how much more you can get by belonging to a union versus not belonging to a union
Mm-hmm.
shop.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what the percentage is now, but you make a lot more money and you get a lot more benefits if you're unionized.
Well, and I think a lot of people have that now, and they can go in and they can join a union,
Right.
but they haven't been part of the big struggles to get to those places.
I understand.
And I think that's the younger generation of folks. I think
I'm
that's
sorry.
a younger generation of folks who are coming
Right.
into unions, especially established unions, machinist, electrical worker.
Mhm.
Can you do you have any thoughts on that? On how perhaps people join unions, but perhaps are not active in their unions. Did you see any of that? Like,
Oh yeah. But then you got to get them interested.
yeah.
You got to get out there and try to school them. And I know I can remember some of the worst scenarios. Guys were anti-union, and you go, wait a minute, slow down. Well, we thought this, Bill. We thought, no, that ain't true. And then you explain to them what the correct facts are. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, I said, well, you ever think about going to a union meeting? And I used to work them in that way. Get down there, be a participant. And most of them with any brains, they would pick up on it and start coming in to meetings and so forth, and be inquisitive on how the union works. I said, there's not a bunch of goons, like everybody claims, or union bosses. That's all a bunch of baloney. But anyways.
Well, and a union starts with its members, really, and if you don't have people being active, and they're just there for the benefits,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's going to weaken a union considerably.
Sure.
and perhaps with the historical you referred to me as a scholar. I wouldn't go that far, but with a historical perspective, it's always disappointing to see when people aren't as involved as they perhaps could be. So, Vice President of Transportation, ground workers in the airlines and railroads. What were maybe some of the big issues you had while you were president? Or vice president? Were there any big legal or political issues, or anything that really stands out as maybe your hardest struggle in that position, or your most difficult work, or maybe the thing that finally made you decide on retirement?
No, I just had a lot of time.
Okay.
I got tired of traveling, and in fact, I went a year early. I went at age 64.
Okay.
I said I'm going to start enjoying the family and the kids and all that. And that's what I did. People were saying, Bill, why are you going a year early? Because I feel like it. I think I traveled long enough. And well, what are you going to do when you retire? Play golf.
Right. And have you?
Yeah, I have.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Well,
But there's many challenges. I mean, you know, vice president, and it's a big scope that you got to cover, because not only you got to worry about them, then you report to your hierarchies, the executive council, the international president. You know, not that I ever got in that type of arena in trouble. I didn't. I never did, because I used to voice my opinion quite well. Executive council, and what I believed in, and if it wasn't ridiculous, I would get by with it. If I was way off base, somebody would tell me so.
Right.
And anyway, I had that type of working relationship, and through the time that I was a union rep, and I guess that's what made it successful, because I knew when to talk, I knew when to listen, and I knew how to apply stuff too.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Well, I know that you had a really close relationship with John Peter Paul.
Right.
You sort of came through the ranks together. What has it meant for you to have sort of a partner? I mean, because when people talk about, even when other people talk about you, they talk about you together. That you were buddies and you worked closely together for a really long time.
Right.
What has it meant for you to have somebody kind of with you along the way that you could, I assume, rely on and help you with hard problems and bounce ideas off of? And
it's a good feeling.
Yeah.
It really is, that you could talk to somebody, you know, and just sit there and trash things out, you know, and find an answer together. It was just good. It's a good feeling. We do it even now when we're both retired. We don't like to criticize because we're not there anymore.
Right.
Everybody's got different styles.
Right.
And
is that how you say it now?
Yeah.
It's different styles, not criticism.
Different styles, yeah. And we're very good. And when he was my boss, and some days I think he was wrong. I walk in the aisle, John, could I see it? Yeah. And I tell him, no, we aren't going to do it, Bill, that way. Then I bring something up. Hey, that's a good point. Go out there and apply it. But I had a pretty good relationship with him. A lot of people that are subordinate to an officer of the union probably couldn't get away with it as much as I did, because of coming up true with him, and vice versa with me. We never two-timed each other. You know, we're solid citizens, and he got in trouble, I'd be right there trying to help him out. I don't care if it's members or what. He would do the same with me. So it's a really nice feeling. That's the best way I could say it. And he's been straightforward with me over the years. And here it is. We drove from Cocoa Beach over to his house, because he said, well, you got to go up there with me, Bill. Come on over, then we'll drive down to where we're at today.
Lady Lake. The Villages.
Yeah, the Village.
It's kind of has two names. So.
Yeah. So anyways, no, it's a good feeling, and I learned quite a bit from him, and hopefully he learned something from me.
Okay. Well, I'll find out in the next interview.
Yeah, you will. He'll probably tell you he's a lying son again. No.
Well, was there anybody else in the union that you looked up to or relied on for guidance, especially in the early years when you were, shop steward at Mohawk? Was there anybody in place there at the time that you relied on to help you up?
Oh yeah, a lot of good reps there. Yeah. One of them's dead now. He was the localized president His name was Bill Malpese. Oh, good, strong union rep. His family grew up in Pennsylvania, steel mills, that type of situation. And I had another guy, Tom Williams. He ended up going to work for TWA over in the Beirut area. He left Mohawk and he went over and made a ton of money, getting shot at and everything else. And he's now retired out in California. And just good people. I mean, you didn't have to ask them to do anything. They'd be right there. Bill, we already know what you need. We're going to do this. Is it okay? Go do it. And we were a tight-knit group. And of course, like I said, John and us, we've been together for so long. We're like brothers. In fact, a lot of people say, "You sure you two ain't related?"
And what about outside the union? Was there anybody outside the union that was a big influence on you?
Well, I forgot to mention, I went over it very lightly. My uncle was a big influence on me.
And your mother's brother? Or your
Yes.
father's brother?
No, my mother's
Your mother's
brother.
brother, okay.
And he was Grand Lodge representative for the IM, and he passed on in '68. I remember when I was working in the engine shop.
So you'd been a member about 10 years, or about
50 years.
No, but when he passed away, you'd already been a member 6
yeah.
or 7. So he was probably really proud to see you in there moving
Yeah,
on
he
up.
was.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'd get a problem or something like that. I talked to him at night when he was home. And I said, "Hey, Young, I don't like the shop steward we got." And I tell him why. And he said, "Well, there's one way to cure that, Bill." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Go run for the job." And that's what I did. And I've been running ever since.
Yeah.
But he was good. I mean, and sit down, a very sensible guy, and he had most upstate New York. He had a cover, and very smart. Not because he was my uncle, but he was a very smart guy. And that were some of the people that give me my start, helped me along. And I never forget that. Yeah, there's one way to take care of that. Go run against them.
Well, is there anything that we haven't discussed today that you would like to mention?
No, there's probably a bunch of stuff that happened during my vice president year that's just not snapping back right now.
Okay.
The organizing was big, that we did.
Yeah. And 94 to 99.
Yeah.
Lots of organizing.
I did a lot of negotiations. I was involved in negotiations quite a bit for John, and also when I was in there, I would still jump in on the tail end of negotiations to make sure we got a decent contract. And no, I think that's about it.
Okay. Well, what's been your least favorite part of the work that you've done?
Least favorite? I never really had. Other than what bothered me, let me put it that way.
Okay.
What bothered me when somebody got fired, okay? And you would try your darndest to get him back, and you knew he was innocent, and you end up going through arbitration, they rule against you. That would hurt me. Because we had facts. Somehow the facts that come out right, the arbitrator upholds the company. And another thing that kept me going in this business for so long is the way management treats employees. I mean, that's what make me go out there and fight twice as hard. The way they would screw over employees, screw my expression, and then just disregard that they're human beings. But that's what they practiced way back then, and they're still practicing it now. Try to downgrade you, put you under, Yeah, you're a part of a middle class, I'm up here, sitting on top of the pack, making millions of dollars, and you guys don't know nothing. And once somebody starts talking like that, I'm off to the races. Now I gotta beat this guy somehow.
Right.
Yeah, but that's how we work. And
Okay. And your favorite?
And thank God we got unions.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Well, and what's been your favorite part of the work?
Oh, working with people. I guess a people person, and just working in general with people over the years, and with the ups, the goods, the downs. I enjoyed it. it was a nice ride.
Okay.
Yeah, not an easy one,
Right.
but it was a nice ride.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you don't have anything else to add, I think we
Okay.
are finished. Thank you so much for participating
Thank you.
and for taking the time to come and be interviewed today.
Thank you.